Welcome everybody who's here today and watching online on the replay. This is part 5 of our goal setting and achieving series. And this one in particular is letting go of our blocks, emotional and mental healing. Okay, so as I said, this is part 5 of the goal setting and achieving series. And we've been through the goal setting, we've been looking at habits and subconscious mind and working with those parts. And of course, then creating motivation that sticks and creating a grand vision of the future so we know what we're moving towards. Now at part 5, it's letting go of our blocks. And in my perspective, this is arguably one of the most important parts. I mean, obviously you need to have a goal and you need to know where you're going. Those are of course fundamental pillars, but this part is like in certain scenarios, it can mean the difference between manifesting what you want to manifest and not, or just taking a very long time to get there. So in this presentation, that's really what we're going to be focusing on. So little manifestation 101. So just an example, I'm using the law of attraction to manifest the kind of reality I want to live in. I've been focused on keeping my vibration as high as I can, as often as I can. I've followed all the techniques, tactics, and methods I've learned from endless numbers of spiritual teachers, and I'm pretty sure I got it sussed. Yet here I am 5 years later, and my manifestation still hasn't come about. So why is that? Well, there's 2 likely reasons for that. A, that thing I thought I wanted wasn't in alignment with my path, and so spirit has not delivered because there are other things coming to me that are more coherent with who I naturally am. And then there's B, which is more often the case than not, because a lot of the times the things that we're yearning for, whether it's coming from our ego or nudges from our higher self, generally, if it's in our path, then if we're experiencing it and we're wanting it, then usually, it's in our path. But more often the case than not, we're holding on to emotional or mental blocks that are hindering us from experiencing the version of reality that we want to prefer. So lack and abundance, the 2 polar opposites, essentially. Scarcity and expansion. A person who's conditioned to buy into lack and scarcity will gravitate towards lack and will remain closed off to opportunities, whereas a person who's conditioned to buy into their own abundance and personal expansion will not block opportunities. And opportunities, of course, come in so many different forms, whether that's work, relationships, the food you're going to eat next for your meal, anything. And generally, it's all coming back to that same thing. I think and I feel that I'm unworthy. Now, a lot of this is really kind of focused on times that perhaps we felt rejection or disempowerment in some way. So we think and feel that we're unworthy, and then the universe delivers to us exactly what we feel we're worth. It's just naturally the universe is going to give us what we're putting out, whether that's a vibrational standpoint or our mental beliefs that are going on. And that could come in the form of a salary from a job that we don't feel fully satisfied with, or perhaps a relationship, an intimate relationship that reflects our self-identity of unworthiness back to us. I feel like I only deserve to live off the crusts of life when the rest of the world seems to be getting a piece of the bread in the middle. Now, the whole purpose of this, generally, whether it's the emotional body or even the mental body, all we're really going to be doing is substituting lacking emotions and lacking mental beliefs with loving emotions, and positive beliefs and positive. Now, we can imagine that the typical person in society today, I say typical, everyone's different, everyone's on their own unique path, but generally, as a society and as a world on the whole, we've been conditioned to buy into lack and fear because we're just so full of it's easier to control a collective that's fearful and disempowered than it is a population that is empowered and is strong and knows what they're about. Now, the idea of this whole thing, as I said, we've got the lack and the love, the polar opposites. And what we want to do, we want to counterbalance all that lack and that negative emotion with love. But we actually want to make the love stronger than the lack. So you can imagine, like at the moment, say I'm swimming around, say you're swimming around in a pond, and this pond represents your love energy that you hold, the love that you have for yourself. and the love that you're experiencing thus then in your outer reality, because it's how you feel. Your inner reflects your outer. So you're in this pond of love, and it's a pond. You've got some love. You feel okay, but you know you could feel better. And there's these things inside you that are not feeling too good, and you want to feel better. You want to get rid of these negative feelings and emotions that you've been carrying around for decades sometimes. And so it's time for change. And now you start bringing in this love energy, like we're going to go into, like we've already experimented with in that guided meditation. You're going to bring in this love energy, and you're going to build your love energy up into this. Keep building it, and the next thing you know, it turns into a lake. The next thing you know, then it turns into an ocean, and you're literally swimming around in this ocean of love. And this ocean of love, any kind of lacking emotion, any kind of negativity of internal emotion that's built up in your chakras, your organs, or body parts, whatever, wherever it is in your body, these emotions are somewhere in your body. This ocean of love, that negativity cannot exist in all that love energy. It just can't. Love will trump negativity every time, because this universe is biased towards love. It's naturally, this universe was feminine by design to start with, and the feminine represents the light and love, and the masculine came in later. And so love is going to win. So in the presence of love, the lack cannot stand. The lack has to rise up to meet the love, and by that point it's no longer lack. So that's the whole intention. We're going to create an ocean of love within our hearts and the whole of our beings. And that's all your inner shadow work, your inner child work, all in one. Love yourself, love your inner child, and that's the work. So now I can talk about all this lack, but why not let's just focus on why we are loved, why we can feel love, why we are worthy. And of course, with this whole goal setting, motivation, personal development, so much of it is always coming back to the same thing, it's self-worth. And there's different traumas, of course. You've got the three core human traumas: abandonment, rejection, and abuse. I would say personally, when it comes to this, it's so much to do with rejection, but then maybe that's me with my own perception of my own path that is tainting that a little bit. But also you can feel unworthy if you've been abused when you were a child. Like if there was verbal, physical, emotional abuse, you can feel unworthy in some way, because that can create that. Or even being abandoned by a child, as a child by your mother, being abandoned, and that kind of creating that kind of, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable because I've been left in the cold kind of thing. So there's so many different things that can lead to us feeling unworthy. And by the time I've said all that, you've probably read what's on the screen. But the truth is, underneath all of that environmental conditioning you've picked up along your path in these incredibly challenging societal structures that we've built, you are worthy. You're worthy simply by existing, simply by breathing. All humans, and all beings for that matter, are all equal. We are all one. Nobody is any better or any worse than anybody else. It's just that collectively, as I said, we've been bred to live in fear and disempowerment to make us easier to control as a collective. So why not make now the time to break out of this self-imposed prison that we've put ourselves in? Why not reframe our internal landscapes and our self-identity into a new form that serves, supports, and makes us feel better in our own skin and loving ourselves and our life, perhaps in a way that we never have felt before? And the good news is these tools are very powerful, as you may have experienced already in the meditation, for example. They can help you. So the blocks to focus on, we're really focusing on the emotional and mental. That's the whole point of this. And I would say there's not really, really emotional and mental is, you've got then the spiritual body as well, but it's not really too much of a concern. So emotional and mental. With the emotional side, we've got the three core human emotions, and just bear in mind there's so much interweaving with these two aspects, the emotional and mental bodies. As I'll say in the next slide, they're so interwoven. So what I'm saying in one can also relate to the other and vice versa. The three core human emotions. So any kind of, the blocks that we're holding on to can be residual unfelt negative emotions that stem from either childhood and sometimes even, past lives, a theme of lifetimes, or we've been going through the same emotion that we've just had stored in the chakra, and then it goes into the astral chakra system, and then reincarnate, we've got the same issue. Anger, sadness, and fear. So if we're holding on to any kind of bits of residual anger, sadness, and fear that is just stuck, consciously we may not even be aware of these three emotions going around inside us, but sometimes they'll come out. Something will get triggered, and we might, right, we've got to feel this now. I'm feeling this, I've got to feel it out. Now's the time. Then we've got the three core human traumas, and that are still lingering in the body from some form of either mild or extreme trauma related to either the three core human traumas of abandonment, rejection, and abuse. And just like anger, sadness, and fear, these are like the primaries, and then pretty much every kind of lacking emotion or trauma is a sub-trauma or emotion underneath, or can be seen that way. Mental. So on the mental side of things, belief systems that have been conditioned into our minds that we've environmentally picked up from childhood and beyond. For example, you could have your mother may have said, you can't be an artist, you need to get a real job. Or bullies in school saying you're stupid and worthless, and the school teacher saying you'll never amount to anything, or dad saying we're a poor family. And now all of those things, it's the value that we give, and especially at that childhood age or those younger years where we're so susceptible and we give so much value to these authority figures, teachers, parents. We give so much value to what they say and believe, and then we grow up and realize actually that really, we're all kind of children. Like none of us really have a clue what we're doing, but yeah, it's all about the value that we've given. Yeah, you can, I don't have to tell anyone here how much of an impact that can have on a person growing up and throughout the rest of their lives. Almost brings a tear. But the emotional and mental blend. So, like I've been saying at the start of this, there's such an interlap between the two bodies. And by the way, I just want to say that a copy of this presentation will be available for free. I'm going to put it into the chat before we end the meeting, just so that you can go back over this, because there's a lot of stuff. I'm kind of going through it quite quickly. And this presentation, in my view, is because it's such a fundamental part of the whole process. It's almost like it could do with being broken down into more than one presentation. So I've kind of put a lot in. So in regards to the emotional body, and the mental body, they're both intimately linked. So, for example, while neutralizing our emotional blocks, it is often the case that in this process, we naturally redefine our mental belief systems. That's part of the forgiveness. When we forgive the emotion, all of a sudden it clears up a space that we're able to see things from a different perspective, because we don't have any more resentment anymore, for example, towards anybody else. And the same can work in reverse. Sometimes changing our mental belief systems and meanings can also heal the emotional body. They can change the charge of the emotion simply by essentially positively reinforcing, not necessarily with love energy, but something of a positive nature, something, I hope that's on the next slide. No, that's a different one. Well, that works. Something, forgiveness, and just substituting with something that's positive. And however, as we are the most emotional race in this universe, as far as I've learned, for most people, I would suggest working directly with the emotions to neutralize them, rather than just kind of trying to rely on using mental belief systems to kind of to flick the switch in the emotional body, which doesn't really. It's a very mental way of looking at things. It's something, for example, anybody here who may have heard of Bashar, for example, and the Sasani Collective. There's different ways of looking at working with emotions. Depends on who you ask, but from my perspective, I would just suggest, work with the emotions directly. Don't try and use belief systems to try and cover up, I suppose is one way of saying it. But then we got on the mental side. So this is part of the blending I've been talking about. So generally, thought follows feeling, and that means that the feeling comes before the thought, or the emotion comes before the thought. So we'll have an emotion, and that one will elicit a thought to manifest in our minds. So where do our thoughts come from? Some of the thoughts we experience are manifesting from an emotion just beneath the surface of our awareness. Generally, these thoughts are distorted by the emotion and rarely hold any grounding in reality. For example, we're in a relationship and we're afraid that our partner's going to cheat on us. Like that, I would say, I don't know how many times out of 10, but every case is different. But like a lot of the time, I know in my own experience, I had one time a few years back that was never the case. Yet my fear of rejection was so strong in my solar plexus at the time. Was like, oh, I'm gonna get cheated on, even though it was I had no evidence. There was not. She wasn't doing anything to suggest that she was doing that. Yet, like my own insecurities from my own theme of rejection, all of that stuff, it distorted my thoughts, and so I was not grounded in reality in that sense. So that's one example of where thoughts can come from. So we have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful of, I'm getting to this in a section next coming up, and then B, some of the thoughts we experience are entirely habitual and learned by nature. And that's quite a lot of our thoughts, that's our environmental conditioning, what we've learned in school from our parents, how to use a phone. Like that's habitual, like that's a process of, using your mind that everyone's familiar with, and remembering how to do something, for example. And then we've got some of our thoughts as well come as downloads from the causal, such as our superconscious spirit. I know going very esoteric into all of this, but I think that appeals to most of this audience here. And yeah, going back to this slide again of, for example, this one really focuses on the emotions, the emotional side of things. So the emotions being stored in the chakra points and the other bodily organs. Doesn't really touch on the mental at all, but this is a great image to lead into the emotional healing section. It's one of my favorites of all time for this. Now, starting with the working with the emotional block. So this is first of all, I'll just talk about my own experience here. Like I don't have any kind of official certification, but I've been studying spirituality, metaphysics, emotional healing, personal development for the past almost 7 years now. And I've learned a lot of different things. And this particular process is a self-help process. Now, all I can say is just, if you do wish to use it, I know that in my own experience, I've had profound, it's changed my life. But just probably the most important thing I can say is you can practice this, but just remember that you are 100% safe and protected the entire time. Just make sure that you're doing it in a safe environment where you feel comfortable in being able to express what you need to express, to feel what you need to feel, and to let the emotions out that need to come out. But this information is entirely for you to use. Like, I'm just trying to kind of basically give a disclaimer here just to say that this is what it is, and that I hope it helps, basically. So working with the emotional blocks, this is a very refined process where I've kind of just put it down into a very small, there's so much more kind of like context that can be given to this, but just for the sake of this presentation, I've condensed it down. And if you want a copy of this presentation, as I said, you'll be able to take it away. And I can even give you another document as well that goes into more depth on this that will help with you perhaps trying to use this for yourself. So the first part of this is writing down all of the traumatic life events from our earliest memories up until this point in our lives now. And then we can number each of those memories from 1 to 10, 10 being the most intense in terms of its level of trauma, and then 1 being the least intense. And then 2, we need to lay or sit down. You can do it stood up as well if you want to, but with eyes closed and both hands on heart, that's what I would suggest. Now, what you can do is you can, of course, this can be, for someone who has been through a very complex stress, like a post-traumatic stress disorder, whether that's complex or otherwise. It may be a good idea to have perhaps do this with someone else there with you if you don't feel entirely comfortable in facing these emotions, because of course I know from my own experience, when you're facing these emotions, some of them, it's overwhelming. you know. It's like your chest can concave, it feels so uncomfortable, it's exhausting, it's painful physically, even though it's an emotion, but it just is, you know, we've all been there. So just, yeah, if you need someone to support you in doing this, then that's what I would suggest and I would recommend. But otherwise, I personally, from my own personal, like what my experience, I've been able to do this on myself, just knowing that I'm safe and I'm protected. And the good thing is as well is like the light is at the end of the tunnel. Like the treasure is in the pain. And we have to go into the pain in order to realize and to reap the rewards of the treasure, which is on the other side, which is that emotion no longer being a part of our reality. Anyway, so we replay the memory in the cinema screen of our mind's eye, of our third eye, of our mind, while being fully aware of any feelings that may arise in the body. Okay, so you just play that memory back in your mind, whatever it is. But now, as soon as when you're replaying that memory, just be very mindful of your entire body and just focus on any kind of sensations that may come up for you. It may be really strong, or it may be very mild. You may not even feel anything. And if you don't feel anything, then great, like move on to another memory. You don't have, perhaps now is not the time for you to be focusing on healing that memory. But then if you do feel something, usually it depends on where it's going to be in the body. It could be some kind of like trauma in your toe that you got when you were pushing yourself too hard to lose weight or something on the treadmill or something like that, or a lot of the time it's going to be in the main chakras. For example, rejection, I know for me, is heavily in the solar plexus, or was and still is, but you know, it's heavily reduced now, and I want the same for everybody. Heart chakra, of course, big one. So for me personally, heart chakra, solar plexus, and then of course some healers would also suggest it's all of childhood trauma is in the root chakra, and so there's different ways of approaching it. But just analyze your body, get in touch, and as soon as you feel something, just cut out that mental playback from your mind. Just stop, get out of your head, and get completely into your feeling body. And focus 100% of your attention and your consciousness onto that area of your body, wherever it is. And just start to breathe. Both of your hands on your heart still, and just starting to breathe. And breathe in into that part of your body, and then breathe out from that part of your body. And what we're doing here is essentially expanding the emotion. We're allowing the emotion to expand. And of course, when we're expanding an emotion like that, it can lead to more feeling, more tears, more pain. But again, the only way in is out. Now, yeah, again, just remember as well, going through that, expanding the emotion through the breath. And of course it hurts. Some of these emotions, well, again, I don't need to tell any of you that, but know that you're 100% safe and protected when you're going through this process. That's one of the most important things. Is even though it's so incredibly intense, just remember that emotion is a part of you. That emotion is you, and it's a part of you that needs to be felt, and treat it like that 2-year-old, 4-year-old version of yourself that just needs a hug. That's what's going to get you the results. And then 10, yeah, feel the trapped emotion. Is that because it is that energetic? Is because, you know, if only every single person on this planet throughout the past thousands of years had felt their emotions fully as much as they needed to and didn't bury them like we're conditioned to, you know, societally, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today, where there's so much mental health issues, emotional health issues, because it is the energetic is that emotion. The emotion is energy. So, and it's just been crying out to be felt for so long. So we need to give it that opportunity after lifetimes and lifetimes in some cases where it never got felt. But now's the time. So why not make it now? Make it now, and it will be one day for the rest of your life kind of thing. Whether intense or mild, just continue breathing into the emotion until the emotion is exhausted and felt. And what I mean by that is, like, sometimes when you're going into that intense emotion, you're crying and you're wailing, like you might be in it might be anger you're dealing with, and you're needing to express that like in a healthy way, not projecting onto someone else, but like punching a pillow, something like that. Anything in that way that, you know, allows the expression of its fear. You might be shaking uncontrollably, like so afraid, or you might be sad where you're just crying your eyes out. It doesn't matter what it is, but just let that exhaust itself. Now, the interesting thing here is the next part of the process is getting into the love energy cultivation for rebalancing the emotion. Just like I said about the lack and love polarity and biasing it towards the love instead of lackfulness. Now, the interesting thing here is with the love energy cultivation, you can actually start doing it from quite an early onset. Like you can do it when you're still doing the breathing and the expansion of the emotion, because what can actually happen is it's when you when you bring in the love energy, it's like, and you're saying, I have so much compassion for you, I love you, all of this stuff like that the vibration of compassion is just gonna grab onto that heavy emotion and just go like yank it up and be like, right, you're gonna have to come up. And then you start crying even more, you start bringing more love energy into yourself, and it just makes you cry even more. That's a good thing, so keep going. when would anybody tell you that crying is a good thing anyway? Well, of course people do, but so love energy cultivation for rebalancing, with one hand on your heart and now one hand on the area of your body containing the exhausted emotion, you can begin the I love you affirmation. And you can repeat the affirmation with intention. And of course, intention is everything. For between perhaps 2 minutes, or in some cases, I know there was one time when I'm really going through a time, like it took 20, 30 minutes to get to a point where I was like, it was just bliss. I literally went from a depression and like feelings, the lowest I ever, the lowest was the low, to like really happy and really chirpy and full of love in myself within just a few minutes of doing this. It was just, people need to know about this. It's so powerful. Anyway, yeah, so just starting to build up that love energy and just continue filling up your love energy fuel tank until you feel your love energy quotient is stronger than the energetic of the stuck emotion. So back to that lack and love polarity, and just making the love stronger again. Just keep building up that love energy in the heart chakra, and then you can then you can then start moving the energy. So the love energy, generally you're going to build it up in the heart chakra, but it's also kind of all encompassing, it's not just in one place. And so you can then start to direct it just with your intention, thoughtful intention. You can even use your hands and use your feeling of your hands as well, and the feeling of your whole body. And you're still in the feeling body at this point as well, of course, as I was saying. So feel the love energy moving from your heart to the affected area. You can move it to the affected area, you can move it to the whole of your body, it's up to you. But the whole idea is we're engulfing that heavy emotion with love energy. We're wrapping it in love so much that it just cannot stand it, and it has to transmute. So yeah, continuing the I love you affirmation. Now, like I was saying earlier on in that meditation, we can start getting a bit more creative, because I know for me, I can sit there and say, I love you, I love you, I love you over and over again. It works. But I find as well, it's like it loses its juice after a while, and I need to switch it up. So, for example, so you can do it trauma related. And these are just very basic examples, and you can find something that works for you. But I know for me, these work really well. And I'm not going to say them out loud. You can read them. Abandonment, I am with you. I'm your best friend. You are not alone. Rejection, you are worthy. You are lovable. You are strong. Abuse, you are safe. You are protected. No harm will come to you now. So it's essentially a substitution game. We're substituting the heaviness of what we've been through with the positive, loving reinforcement that we need. to counteract it. The only thing we must make peace with. So people talk about forgiveness, but what I've learned from my studies is that, yeah, it's a beautiful thing to forgive other people. But all we really need to do is focus on forgiving ourselves, and specifically focus on forgiving the emotion. Because it's only once the emotional charge is quelled, when it's neutralized, when it's balanced, when it's loved, forgiveness can then come naturally. Forgiveness is then almost like a byproduct of forgiving the emotion, because it's hard for me to say, hey, like, I really resent you still, but I forgive you. That's not coming from the heart. That's like my mind saying, I want to forgive you, but my heart's not. So clear the emotion and forgiveness can come. Getting creative again. There's those different examples here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just getting really creative. Like, you're human, so you're one of the most creative beings in this universe. So you can come up with what's right for you in the particular moment. Because every moment is going to be different. Every trauma, every emotion, you know, everyone's going to experience it differently. So these are just different examples. A good one there. I recognize you as a part of me that wants to be expressed and loved unconditionally. Yeah, that's actually a top one I've used a hell of a lot. So, okay, oh yeah, we're on 17 now. Yeah, 16, we're on 17. So this was another aspect I just added into the presentation while we were watching that video. So working with visualization in unison with affirmation is just very powerful. It's one of my I'm an apprentice of a spiritual teacher called Brad Johnson. His love cultivation technique is all about visualization, whereas I've kind of gone down this slant of affirmation, and both work and both are very powerful. So for example, using visualization, you can combine it with the affirmation, like I love you, while visualizing yourself in your happy place. And everyone's going to be different in this regard. So it could be at a beach, in a meadow, in a forest, under a waterfall, in the family home, with people and things surrounding yourself with what you love. Now, for me personally, I love a meadow with kind of like hills, rolling hills around, green grass, blue sky, with a bit of clouds here and there. And I've got a white gown on, and it changes a lot. But like, usually I'm flying around and there's my dog there, and there's a deer. For some reason, I don't know why there's a deer there, but I'm flying and it just feels good to be free, and I'm enjoying it. It reminds me that the sky's the limit, and that for me brings in good feelings. But I find it's not quite as powerful as affirmation for me personally. Everyone's going to be different. So this little graphic I made a little while back. So you've got the guy on the left there. It's got loads of karmic emotions like residing within his chakra points that are weighing him down. I was actually going to put like a little brain in here to visualize the emotional block side of it. But then he decides to sit down. He starts to cultivate love energy. He does it every day for at least 2 minutes a day for, every day. And before he knows it, his whole life has changed. So now on to the mental block section. It's the first time I've presented or really put this all together like this. I'm really happy with it. So self-identity. Identity is pretty much everything, because when we're born and then we're growing up and we're like 2 years old and we're so pure, like we're so we haven't got all these belief systems that we've inherited or learned at that time, and so our sense of identity is just, it's innocent, in that way. And of course, the good thing about our identity then is that, if a 2-year-old can have that kind of identity, which is very pure and innocent and self-loving and just very neutral, I suppose, then we can also create the same for ourselves at this point now in our lives, because identity is malleable. It's a really good, I don't know if it's true, if it's a true story or not. It is actually a true story, but yeah, well, it exists. 2 boys were accidentally switched at birth. One came from a poor family, the other from a wealthy family. The boy raised in the wealthy family went on to become a business owner, while the other boy continued the theme of poverty that he experienced in his childhood because that's all he'd ever known and experienced. So genetics do not play a part in identity. Mindset is everything, and your self-identity is flexible. And then we've got part 2 of this. So yeah, self-awareness. Self-awareness is, in my view, it's about 80% of this game of reprogramming the subconscious and reprogramming the mind, the conscious mind. It's just like when we're catching heavy emotions, when they come up, when they're triggered, or when we're going through the emotional healing process, we also need to be conscious of the thoughts that we give value to in our mind at any particular time. We need to catch these thoughts, kind of like you've got like a cricket, a cricket mitt, and they're catching the cricket ball. We're doing the same thing with these thoughts when they come along. And we just want to catch them. And if they're thoughts that are generally based in any kind of lack, or they make us feel negative, it can serve us to ask, where does this thought come from? Why has this thought come to my awareness? And is it based in reality? Now, the interesting thing here as well that I haven't mentioned, but it's just come to my mind, is that we can sometimes think of something that we really want, like, oh, I want to be, I want to be self-employed, and I want to be earning X a month. And like, while that feels good, we also then have those kind of blocks, those mental blocks that tell us we're not worthy to get it. So we have to bear that in mind as well, that there's, even if, that's something we want and we want to strive towards that, it's a thought that's based in abundance. No, yeah, but then you get the thought that's negative. So actually, that's, sorry, gone off on a trail there. So point 3, momentum and thought forms. Before I go into this, I'll just explain a little bit about my own personal understanding of thought forms, what I believe, see them as. So we have a thought, which is, it's a thought, but then we have a thought form, which is essentially a thought that has had a lot of momentum and power built into it through repetition and reinforcement. For example, we'll think the same thought over and over again once a week for 30 years. It becomes almost a thought form that has so much strength that it doesn't just anymore exist in our mind. It can actually move into the space around us. It can actually, when you're doing the dishes at the kitchen sink and you often thinking the same thought while you're there, that space, that actual physical space will actually contain that thought after a while, if it has enough power behind it. And that is a thought form, essentially, a super thought. So in any given moment, we have the power to choose which thoughts we give momentum to. And that's probably one of the most important parts of this whole mental blocks, is just knowing that we are empowered to be able to choose our thoughts, and it's up to us. We don't have to continually deal with disempowering and lacking thoughts. Why do we always want to buy into lack all the time? It's because it's what we're used to so often. It's how we identify ourselves. So now we can give our thoughts momentum in a different direction, in a direction that we prefer, that's more positive. So thoughts are all about momentum. The more energy and focus we give to a thought, the more it'll expand and into a stronger and stronger thought form, which will increase the frequency of how often you experience this thought. So going back to the dishes analogy of like, I'm having that thought every time I'm doing the dishes here, because it's almost becomes a habit. And that's until you decide to nip it in the bud. So this is similar to what I said before. So be mindful, as while some thoughts are manifesting from a distorted emotion, all thoughts are ultimately messengers. And this is what I was getting at before about the whole, like, I want to be self-employed and earn X amount of money and like have this kind of abundant financial security, just so my ego can feel safe on a day-to-day basis, that kind of thing. But we have to be mindful of both sides of that. The side, I love that, like, that's abundant, I'm going to be self-employed, that's great. And then I've got the other part that's like, you're not worthy enough to do that. But both thoughts are messengers. So it's coming back to that awareness thing of being like, right, I can see both of these thoughts, and that's it. It's like that doctor said in that video we just watched. It's like becoming the consciousness that's observing the different thoughts. That's what you want to. That's what we really need to be doing here. It's almost taking a third-person perspective or a bird's-eye view from above and just observing what's going on in our mind, and just really, becoming more empowered, I suppose, through that. So be mindful of what actually holds basis in reality and what doesn't, and choose wisely which thoughts you wish to entertain and give weight to. And this is the next part. So focus on what feels good. There are different ways of sorting through which thoughts are helpful to us and which ones aren't, but really it's very simple and we don't need to overcomplicate it. When we become aware of a thought that we don't prefer, we then have the opportunity to substitute it for a thought that we do prefer. And that naturally almost happens. That dynamic of like, right, something is created, whether it's an emotion, a thought, or an experience in our lives that we don't want, we then also create the opposite charge of what we do want. So it exists. We just have to start working towards that. A new thought that perhaps elicits an emotional response that feels good or better than that of the original thought is really what we want to be striving towards. I'm trying to find an example right now. Like for example, I'm going self-employed. Oh, I don't feel worthy. Okay. Well, what if you are actually worthy? Okay. That's one example. Now, it's all about the power of reinforcement. It's like repetitions, building habits, doing the same practice over and over again until you become a master. It's like with the emotional healing, it's the same thing. Anything in life generally, it's all about consistency. And in this case, consistency of reinforcement. Sometimes a thought cycle that we've had on the loop for several decades can be challenging to catch awareness of, and sometimes even more challenging to substitute. But it's always possible through reinforcement. Continue to consciously give less weight to the undesirable thought and more weight to the desired thought. In time, the desired thought will no longer, the undesirable thought will no longer be a part of your mental landscape. And again, going back into this kind of getting creative with your belief system reframing, and with the power of reinforcement, all we're doing is substituting lacking thoughts and beliefs with more positive, abundant, and expansive thoughts and beliefs. And substituting belief systems works essentially the same way as positive affirmation does in emotional healing. And that's why I've given these examples here, where we can use the same things. It's very simple. And again, we don't need to overcomplicate it. We can take that negative thought and just find the polar opposite of it and work with and focus on that instead. I'm sure many of you here have seen something similar to this before, where this is it. Even though this is more of like an emotional scale, the thoughts can also be related to this and kind of overlaid onto it. If we want to focus on the upward spiral, it's going to bring us more into love and joy and expansion and growth and happiness. Or we can continue in this downward spiral if we are in a downward spiral, and focus more on lack, which we have been doing for a long time. So we have an opportunity to change. Why not embrace the opportunity? A positive change. So in summary, and I've kind of blasted through this presentation quite quickly. So in this presentation today, we've covered how to alchemize and heal your stuck emotions by first feeling them and then cultivating love energy in the heart chakra through affirmation and visualization to neutralize the emotion. And the interesting thing as well is, like, it's all in layers. If you can imagine your emotional body is like one big onion. And I can heal that bit of emotion, that rejection trauma that's related to like that kind of sadness emotion. You know, I can take off a layer. I can bring love into it and it will melt it away. But it's a process. You have to take off the layer by layer. But the thing is, when we don't bring in that love energy and we just kind of we can sit with the emotion, we can feel it out, and that's really good and powerful. But a lot of the time, that emotion can almost regrow like a weed, if it doesn't have its substitute to come in to create the polar opposite effect, which is love. So that's why, yeah, feeling the emotion, great, really good, but also do bring in that love energy, because it's just gonna reduce the layers even quicker. It's the way to do it, in my opinion. That's what I would suggest. And then also how to reprogram the mind by substituting thoughts and beliefs that no longer serve us. Now, of course, with anything in life, like aligned action, like if this is on your path to do this, to become your best version of yourself, where you're feeling much better in general, perhaps in so many different aspects of your life. But intention and aligned action is so important. If we don't take action, we won't get the results that we're looking for. However, with these particular processes, if we do take action, then in time, like with practice, our overall vibration is going to increase, our abundance blocks are going to be removed, and we're just going to continue experiencing a new version of reality. Every layer of emotion that gets healed with love, it opens you up to a different version of reality. You're on a new vibrational standpoint, a new vibrational baseline every time. And the more you do this, and especially if you're doing that I love you affirmation every day for at least 2 minutes, like it's just going to start leveling up, and things will change. People in your life will change. So your work situation may change, your friendships may change. Whether or not those are good changes at first seeming, that's to everyone's subjective discretion, but there we go. So thank you. I hope this really helped, and please, the best thing I could ever say to end this would be to please just put it into action for yourself, so that you can experience the kind of transformation that I know is possible for everyone to experience with this practice. So much love to you all.